were done by development workers in quick time and high quality work. When you look at what happened across in Castara when the road went away, and within a week thereabout we had a drivable road again, development workers. So the salaries or the wages for development workers roughly is about 1.54 million every fortnight. So every single fortnight from the development vote, not recurrent, because while recurrent pays salaries generally, the workers we call development workers are so-called development workers because the employment has been, or was rather, projectized, and therefore they are paid from the development vote. So 1.54 million every fortnight to pay development workers from the development allocation for infrastructure. That works out to be about $40.3 million for the entire fiscal period. $40.3 million for the entire fiscal year. Which means, in theory, on our accounts, the Division of Infrastructure will be left with essentially $6.1 million thereabout for development works. I want to think about that. After we pay the wages in development based on the allocation we have, it means that the monies we have to build new roads, to fix Bad Rock, to fix Turpin Bend going down to Charlottesville, to ensure we fix Job Street so that when Bad Rock fixing people could pass, to ensure that we do the work we have to do up at Mount Hay and Roselle and Orange Hill, all fields that bad. And for those of you who think that I don't experience it, I very often choose to drive myself in my own vehicle and have to be dropping in the pothole on them and cussing just like you. But to fix all of that, to treat with coastal erosion, those of you who live on the coastline, like for example those of you who live in Kendall on the coastline where the incursion is great, to treat with those in Plymouth, in that area that's going away to the sea where some infrastructure works was started by a former secretary who was from Plymouth, but somehow we couldn't work out the maths and complete it. To finish that work, to fix Grange that's going away to the sea, the coastal erosion in Pigeon Point, for all of those and every other imaginable development work you want from infrastructure, what remains after we pay the development workers will be roughly around $6.1 million. That's just the reality. And so when you saw us in the house last Thursday, boasting about what we have been able to do with little, really and truly what we have had to do is to use a variety of modalities to fund the government expenses. One of which will mean taking from other divisions that also have critical work and saying, now we have to prioritize some of the work. Owing people and saying, look, we will do design, build, finance. You do the work for us, and we take time and pay. And if you look back at the Chief Secretary question last sitting, it was raised by the member for Roxbury Argyle about why we're not paying off the contractors, whether we should be paying on terms with the contractors, if that's the best approach. But in some instances, that's the only available option that we have to do that. And so when we come to you at the town hall meetings and we say, look, we are working on your problem, but we need for you to be patient. It's not that I'm asking to excuse the division and excuse the line secretaries. I'm just simply saying that based on what we have to execute all of these works, everyone cannot get the help they want at the same time or with the same kind of speed and efficiency that you will like. And then imagine last year when we had the inclement weather, higher than normal levels of rainfall. We all saw it. We had a couple of days, no school, the flooding, the landslips. We had to rush and move people from Bad Rock and so on. You saw it all over the island. And then the ASETA demands now from all over, because we want a retaining wall, we want a retaining wall, we want a retaining wall. The reality is, some of these retaining walls will cost more than $6 million. And those that are potentially injurious to motorists and to the public because they affect public roadways, we have no choice but to do those. Because we can't just pick up a road and move it, especially in instances where we have a singular artery heading in that direction. And so, if you think about the way the THA has been funded and how, for example, that division was able to build new roads, build 2 bridges, fix bridge in Bacolet, fixing the river course over in Friendsfield, removing steps in Moriah, the amount of patching and paving you've seen. In fact, the first place to get some paving was Buku in a big way. If you think about all of those works done and the fiscal space we have to do it, then you will assume that we are miracle workers. But you see, when you're praying people, then God has find a way to take the one coin you have and multiply it. You know, using the lesson of the widow who used the last she had and gave it and multiplied greatly. So it's really got to thank God for the multiplication. But that's the reality. And so, yes, we desire to help all of you. We desire to build retaining walls in every place that need a retaining wall. Pave every road that needs to be paved. And we are outside of an election season, paving and patching as much roads as we can with a spreader that's limping and so on. We'll have to find some $20 million or so to be able to buy new equipment for the patching gang, because the equipment they have all and limping along. And of course, you know, every time we engage the contractors, they make noise. We ain't getting paid. Pay we now, pay we on time, and so on. So all of those things in this coming fiscal, based on what we are allocated, we will have more or less $6.1 million remaining to do all of those things in infrastructure. That's the reality. And so we will have a hard task when we meet on the 15th, because that's where we will be looking at the funding options and looking at how we move monies around the fiscal space to ensure we get the work done. Because we have taken an approach of no excuses, let's find a way to get the problems fixed. No excuses. And so one of the things we discuss over the period that we have been here will be alternative funding options. One, we will continue to engage the public-private partnership modality, as in we share some of the things, and we may have to ask ourselves the question of whether the government is too big, the THA is too big in terms of what it tries to take on, and that we share some of the load with the private sector and would-be investors. We have discussed again the design, build, finance modality, and of course we cannot do that for all the projects, because if we do that for all the projects, the system will not be able to hold. So we discuss that as an option. We discuss what role the companies, the state companies attached to the THA can play in assisting us in terms of getting some of the workflow out. Because by the hook or the crook, we have to get the work done. We have to get the work done by the hook or the crook. So we discussed a variety of options that we may want to use to fund the government's agenda. But beyond that, we looked at every division and we start looking at some broad, outstanding areas that we have to treat with. And of course, some of these areas that I will just mention in passing is by no means an exhaustive list, nor a final list, because we still meet with the administrators. We like a collaborative approach. We want them around the table along with the accountants, and we look at what needs to be done and how quickly we can get the things done. We looked over at the Office of the Chief Secretary, and we looked at things like re-establishing PRDI, acquisition of lands, because on the table for us for the longest while has been finding a way to provide recreational ground for the people out in Golden Lane, because in that small enclave we don't have any recreational facility, and we want to steer our young people away from a life of crime. We look at the work that has to happen at the Shaw Park complex, which is under OCS. We look at oil and gas and energy transition and marine renewables. For example, we look at how we're going to organize the public service and the public service academy, among other areas. In the division of finance in this fiscal year, we want to focus primarily on getting the Victor Bruce Financial Complex up and running. Right? I am happy that I could say to you that the voltage regulator, which for years could not make its way to Tobago, is in Tobago, and the process has started for its installation, which means that we'll be able to get all the elevators back up and running in the building. We do have electrical problems with the AC. We'll be able to get the air conditioning fixed. The roof leaks has to be fixed. And perhaps one of these days I'll go and take out some videos of the buckets catching water in finance, including in the office of the secretary there. So that's what finance focus will be. Over at food security, we spend some time discussing our fishing facilities for fisher folk. Many around the island are in a state of disrepair, but we know many of them really and truly did not get used sufficiently. And so the conversation with the fisher folk has to continue so that we get some of them redesigned and fit for purpose so that there will be more use. We have fishing facilities that are falling into disrepair now. That fisher folk has never one day set foot in it and utilize it properly for the selling of their commodity. And Barbados Fishing Facility might be one of those. So we look at all of those. We even looked at Moriah as a place for a new one of such, but of course, all of this is subject to the availability of funds for it. We looked at the need for veterinary lab services and having a vet lab, which is absolutely needed on the island. We don't have any on the island at the moment. We looked at abattoir facilities, mega farm, expansion in terms of the market food hubs, targeting East and North Tobago, agriculture access roads. We even discussed the fact that the access road workers, that their salaries will need to get some increases. They weren't touched the last time in July last year when we dealt with the workers that we have in agriculture, the other workers we have in agriculture. And again, we have to look at what funds can permit and the availability of funds. In tourism, we looked at our beach facilities. In particular, we spent time discussing Storby and the work that needs to happen there. And I know Storby is smiling because they had a bumper season. All over TikTok, I see you're in a room for people till police had to remind you of how many people they have in your vessel and all of that. Your vessel cram. So right now they're smiling ear to ear. We'll talk about that in a little while. The Bloody Bay Beach facility, the works are ongoing, so we looked at all of that, the security boots, the lifeguard boots, and so on. We looked at new areas for some development works like Pirates Bay, Louis D'Or Bay, Englishman's Bay. We discussed Goat Island and what needs to happen in Goat Island. That was a $20 million purchase by the THA some time ago. And so we looked at all of those things. We even discussed the work that needs to happen for the landing at the jetty in Shallaville before the cruise ship arrives on the 11th. The first one that docks in Shallaville on the 11th. So that has to happen. And we also look at tourism's ability to attract investments into this space. We discuss this sanctuary for a bit and what needs to happen there. But again, all of this, we will have more in-depth conversations. And more than that, look at how we move things around in the fiscal space to meet the priorities when we sit with the accounting officers. In education, we look at the restructuring of DATAS, which is the program for scholarships. And I could tell you right now that I have given them the mandate to provide Tobagonians with a list of what is needed across the space. Because we can't fund everybody who wants to go and study something. But we have to fund what Tobago needs now in terms of where we see a dearth in the space, both in the private sector and the public sector. And we have to ask ourselves where Tobago wants to go in the future and have young people line up to study those things. So they will have that list populated and circulated. And last Thursday, the House Secretary did point out that that was an area for which we didn't even have $1 million allocated, but we spent couple millions well funding people's education. So again, when you see that some folks got their monies a little late and so on, and in Trinidad again it later than we get in it, and is because we are actively trying to move monies around from other areas, other priority areas, to make this scholarship program a priority for you. And sometimes that takes a little while. We also discuss Impact, which is a community education program. We discuss heavily trade schools and the dual education and resuscitating our trade schools. Now, I have learned to not give timelines and so on, but one of the things I don't want us ending this fiscal with is not having our trade schools back up and running at optimal efficiency. That is critical for the island. If our residents, if our citizens have to take advantage of a potential construction boom and so on, we need skilled labor. And studies have shown that quite a number of the people who get certified and so on through our trade schools, they tend to venture out in their own practice. Because the truth is, when we could only pay them $300 a day or less, because minimum wage is what, $164 per day, thereabout. As a tradesman, they call in $500 and up, right? In fact, some of them, if they do their business well, will earn more than a chief secretary in a month as a private sector person. And we want to encourage that. We also discuss extracurricular activities and how we can get our children home safely after these activities. We have observed that there has been a drop in participation, and that might be owing to people having security concerns for their children. The world our children are being raised in today is not the same like the one I went to school. Certainly not the same as some of those around the table who are much older than I am. When we were allowed to go home on our own at any hour of the evening and so on, after you finish school in town, you're lying wrong, you do wherever you catch car, whenever, and you try to go home. The security needs of today, they have been maximized, or they have been materialized before our own eyes. And so we want to ensure that people can safely make their way home, young people, and we want them to participate, because the research has shown that young people, when they participate in extracurricular activities, their academics tend to improve as well, and they become better citizens. We discussed about finishing off Kendall Pool. Work has started there, and of course, when we went in trying to do the work, realized that it's much bigger than what we initially anticipated. We did discuss Scarborough Secondary School. In the budgetary allocation, it was $800,000 for repairs to Scarborough Secondary School and $1 million towards the building of a new Scarborough Secondary School. That was allocated in this budget. Notwithstanding, we are determined to start. The land has been vested already, as I said last week, Thursday, and we're going to move to the design stage. You should see the tender if you haven't seen it already. If it is not out as yet, but a tender to attract designs for the school in relation to the end user brief that was developed by the stakeholders of the school. That is critical. We discussed the school feeding program and how we can treat with that. We also discussed the learning loss from COVID. We also discussed some programs that are not on the island right now, like the MyLat program, for example, and how we improve on those. We discussed whether or not we should be going back to resident learning, meaning living learning for trade, as the youth camp was before, because we know in Trinidad there's a move back towards that sort of arrangement. And this might be a good time to say that I don't need to quarrel or cuss the public servants today, because the teachers in Tobago, they have already started getting their increases. As a matter of fact, the minister announced it today, and by the end of the month's pay, the increases rolling in. So the Eagle has already landed in Tobago, But then if the eagle coming from north, I guess you have to pass Tobago before you get to Trinidad. But more than that, the division, I'm advised that the division has already calculated what it will cost to pay the back pay for those on the establishment. And I'm saying that carefully, for those on the establishment. And so as soon as funds are released for that, we will be in a position to execute immediately, because the calculations and auditing and so on is done where that is concerned. And for those concerned about gratuity and increments, I think there was a slight increase in the vote for gratuity for this fiscal period. And that's because they may have seen that we tried to pay more than we were given last year for gratuities. For increments, I'm advised that what we have calculated and ready for payment is about $8 million thereabout. Believe it or not, there are some teachers in this space who are owed over $400,000 in increments. Clearly, they couldn't have been owed that for just the last 2 years. Right? That means that for donkey years, they just wasn't paying the people their increments. And so now we are trying to find a way to pay that, while at the same time being able to pay the teachers throughout the fiscal period. So teachers, colleagues, as I will call you, in the teaching fraternity, we are working on the matter with increments. We are working on it, we're doing the calculations, and we're looking to see where we can make the payments to see if we could clear up that debt. Right? But after the 15th, we'll be in a position to perhaps say more clearly when and how, because at that point we will know how we are to manage the finances across the fiscal period. Across in health, one of the things we discussed and deliberated on for a long while is customer service. Yes, customer service. Because we don't want, when you go to the hospital at Signal Hill, that you have to wait inordinately long for service. We don't want your experience to be a bad one at all. You see how we're getting some good reports about what's happening at Roxborough? That's what we want for Signal Hill. And so we discuss strategies to work with our internal clients, meaning our medical practitioners, who we love and who we know are hard-working, but who we know that sometimes the circumstances might just not permit them to be as efficient as they should be, and we want to work on whatever those circumstances are and ensure that they're in the best place to give you a service with a smile. And that might be hard in a very high energy, high stressed job. It's difficult in a job like that to always have a smile on your face and to always be nice and kind. But we will work with our internal clients, meet them where they're at, and ensure that we iron out all the kinks so that you, the external clients, get the best quality service from our medical institutions. We discuss inpatient at Roxborough Hospital. So sometime soon, we will be able to see Roxborough move to 24 hours. Actively working on it. In fact, you may have seen a flurry of ads for specialists and so on. It's because they're trying to ensure we have everybody lined up and ready and waiting so that we could get Roxborough to 24 hours within this fiscal period. Already, you have seen some upgrades happening at our cemeteries. Goodwood is completed. Argyle is on its way. And what we're doing is systematically going from cemetery to cemetery to ensure that they have running water, electricity, toilet facilities, because we know what the burial rituals for Tobago is like. During COVID, it pained us when they were telling us that we can't show up to see the people we love by. And you see how many of us, sometimes they were telling us only 5 allowed, 2 allowed, and when you go by the cemetery, you realize the whole village still come out in their mass. Remember those days? Right. And that's because as part of the Tobago culture is sending our people home with grace and with love. So we want to ensure that experience for you is no more stressful than the stress of losing your loved ones. And so we are targeting some others in this fiscal, Boku being one of those. Boku will need a whole overhaul because the structure that's there is terribly cracked up and so on. And I know my good friends down at infrastructure ensuring that the roadway entering that in the soonest possible time we will do something there, fill up the holes at least, so you get to drive in. But while we're doing all of that, we having the conversation about additional cemeteries in areas that are highly populated. We discuss the restructuring of LEP, the moving of derelict vehicles, new ambulances. We discussed that. And let me pause to tell you what's one of the challenges there. One of the challenges there is that we are looking to purchase 10 new ambulances thereabout. We should get about 2 or 3 coming. About 2 or 3 coming, so that will bring some relief, and it means that within this quarter thereabout we'll get 4 new ones in the space. We just collected one for TEMA, which is really for natural disasters and such, but outside of natural disasters on a slow day, we certainly will be of assistance to the medical practitioners. So we did discuss that as an area of concern. The challenge though is that while we're looking to buy 10, we are competing with people buying 100 from the same companies, and there's a limited number of companies worldwide that make ambulances. So it could be a bit of a challenge, but we be getting over there. We discuss upgrading some of our health centers like Canaan to district facility. Plymouth, we discuss need more than an upgrade. We discuss the public educational component that is needed, especially for island that love harvest and love a good stew down, and love with coconut juice and all with starches and thing. I could tell I love it too. I'm from country, that's the food I know, right? But we have to watch our diet, and I don't know, they may show you afterwards that we went hiking and thing this morning, because we are trying to lead by example, right? But a part of that public education campaign is to get you living much more healthily, because if that's the case, we'll spend less money at the hospital on remedial care. Prevention is always better than cure. And 2 areas we discussed as part of this bill out will be French Fort, where we know tons of you go and exercise. I could tell you settlements already paid for lights to go up that street, so you'll be safer in the evening. So we're just waiting on the schedule from Tiantec where that is concerned, so we'll be able to tell you when Tiantec will do the installation, because it's several areas. And of course, health is working on things like stationary bikes and watering stations and that kind of thing. So you could really go out and exercise on a morning or an evening time, whenever you choose fit. And we also looked at that Cano Bay stretch as another option. So that in a nutshell is some of the areas we looked at in health. Mental health also including on how to expand what's needed there. I think the town hall meetings are showing us that we need some expansion. Is everything okay across in Bethel? Some expansion there. But we look at those areas, and of course, let me assure those of you in the rental assistance program who we are paying rent for, because there was natural disaster at your place and we can't get around fast enough to build a retaining wall for you or help you rebuild a home and so on, that let me assure you that we will continue to hold you until you are in a position to be back on your feet. And we're working diligently on that. So no, we have not forgotten you. You are still very much in our minds. Across at settlements, we discuss electrification, because there are several areas around the island that's dark, and we have been working with a list provided to us by the TTPS of areas that they think are dark and require some lighting for overall security. So we're working on those areas. We discuss further the simplifying of the component relocation exercises, about public housing, and you will hear from the secretary in this very soon, sometime in the near future, about how we plan to do that, and having a state company to manage that output for us much more efficiently. We're looking at assessments for Adelphi and Adventure, and that assessment will determine how we utilize those lands for you. I was advised that we may have, in terms of lands available for distribution, somewhere in the region of 62 between now and the end of the year, available for distribution in this space. And we are also working currently on a program to treat with what I would call internal clients of the THA, our public servants, our contracted officers, those who work in the THA as a special target of the government, to ensure that you're able to build your own homes and live somewhere. We look at that construction at Riseland should begin soon. They receive their the certificate of environmental clearance, and I know tender notices went out to do the infrastructural work like roads and drains and so on. So that should start soon, and that is being done in tandem with IDB. In terms of the funding arrangement for that, we should resume in earnest this quarter for the Home Ownership Made Equal program. We did 2 of those distributions coming towards the end of the last fiscal, and we'll do a bulk of those in this current fiscal as well. Across in community development, youth development and sport, we discuss a whole heap of stuff. And yes, we did discuss your basketball courts. Yes, we discussed your playing fields. Yes, we sat and we said to ourselves in our reflection that it is inexcusable that we can't get all of our fields and hard courts ready by now, even as we are approaching 2 years. Yes, we agreed that we have not met our timelines in that regard, and yes, we do apologize sincerely for not meeting those timelines. And there are many reasons for that, but I don't want to give excuses this evening. I want to position us for getting the work done. And so we know for sure Patience Hill will be ready for handover to the community by the 15th of December, thereabout. So you'll get your lights in Patience Hill. That was never there. Across at Louis D'Or, all this soil testing and preparatory work, that phase is completed. And so as soon as we switch on the lights in Patience Hill, we're moving one time to Louis D'Or to have lights in Louis D'Or in a place that never had lights before. We also discussed having a program for treating with some of our informal grounds. And by that I mean the places where you just go and sweat. You know, everybody have a little ball patch somewhere in your community, because your community may not have a playing field like Delaford, for example, but you have an area that you just go and sweat. Once that is on public lands or lands available to the THA, we have discussed the possibility of putting, minor inexpensive lighting there that, you could continue sweating on evening time. Because I prefer you're out there sweating at 10 o'clock in the night than you're doing something else on the block in the evening. We prefer that. And we did discuss, when we discussed this division, the strategies for treating with crime and criminality and engaging our young people, reforming our training programs for the community. We discussed having to assess the pavilions at Plymouth and Table Peace, and I'm advised that those assessments have started already. We looked at the Speyside Pavilion and exploring doing a partnership with the community, because the community, Sidey's Sports Club, that great sports club, has indicated that they are willing to do the labor for us at no cost and bring the community together to do it, and we provide the material. And you'll see a lot more of that in the community, because we want our sports clubs to kind of take ownership of the facilities and manage them well for us. Please, we're going to jump through all the hoops to ensure we get the lights and so on up on your grounds. But please, let us not have to drive past at 1 o'clock in the morning and no one is there and the lights are on, wasting energy. We have to be more efficient and responsible where that is concerned. The Lekoto Community Center is starting as we speak. I did speak previously about the community center at Charlottesville, and that should resume in earnest this fiscal. We also discussed works to be done on some of the other community centers like Mount St. George, and some of the other areas that need perhaps air conditioning, fixing of lights, tiles, paint. Those minor works, we discuss those matters as well. There is a desire for us to also look at some of the schools on the island with grounds, at least grounds for training or areas within the compound that can be used for training. And we looked at Scarborough Secondary, Signal Hill, and the Mason Hall as areas where we could provide some kind, and Light and Life, some informal facility, so you can train on your own premises and then you do your official games at one of our other facilities. That will mean that you have easier access to training. It's readily available, and then you have a secure area that you could have it. We did discuss an area what we informally dubbed the Wassa grounds, and they were written, and we're waiting on them to give us the okay, so we could develop a ground in the back there for the community of Lowlands and those living in that area. And of course, we discussed youth development extensively and how we're going to restructure that, engage our young people much more fervently. That might be a good word, given that a pastor is leading that division. We look at recognition and the rewards program for our sportsmen and women, and how we could improve on that in this fiscal, and having the Lalonde Gordon facility even more engaged and expanded. We are looking to resume work at the Corland Beach facility to complete the rest of the build-out. You may see that today, or while we were here, that the fencing down at the Shore Park playing field, recreational ground, that has been taken down, so that because that was falling down already, so it's been taken down so that we will have safe environment, and some further development works will happen there. And while I'm at it, let me remind you that Dream 11 is coming to Tobago in November. The draw happened sometime last week for the teams, and you could see international players. In fact, Tobago will be on show for some 140 million people who watched the last Dream 11 to look at these games. So there's a big opportunity for tourism as well. Over in infrastructure, well, this is a division that really needs most of the money, right? If we are honest. And yes, we look at all the Allfields Road and them. The Allfields Road, the Allfields Trace, all of them around Lowlands, Montay and Roselle, and all of these roads to be fixed. And how we create a more robust program. Yes, and we have to commend the workers, because it's the patching gang that going around and doing the work. Actually, we have to commend them. And we're going to push them further, ensure they have equipment to drive the work. We look at having licensing office done, a new one done. And yes, my good friends at licensing, ensure you have a appropriate office done, because at the moment, they're unable to do the kinds of inspection on vehicles that are needed, because they just need the kind of ramps to be able to get in under the car and so on. So we want to make those provisions available, because licensing is a department of the THA, right? We pay their workers, and we supply their needs in terms of the office management and so on. Just need to say that. We looked at Bad Rock. We discussed the Scarborough Development Project, Scarborough Beautification, the designs for Bad Rock, not just looking at Bad Rock. And of course, we look at climate change and the mitigation works that need to be done on the coastal area, utility corridors in and around Scarborough. But essentially, infrastructure is trying to do two things for us. They're trying to take care of all the maintenance needs, meaning trying to maintain the bridges and roadways and so on. But we're also looking to see how we could do some iconic projects that changes the way you live and makes it more efficient. So you see that road in Smithfield with the two bridges, where at one point a request of cabinet was made to spend over $40 million to do it, but we were able to do it for $19 million. The same one I answered a question on in the house last week, that we're still owing one payment to, that we have paid $11.5 million, I think it is, to date on that project. You see how now you can't help yourself but passing there, because you're trying to avoid the traffic down on Wilson Road and Milford Road, and they just want to cut out quickly. That's what we want to do, change your life. We want that when you get into the airport, that what was once a donkey cart road, that every chief secretary before me wanted to change at some point, but I ain't so sure about the last one or two. But every chief secretary before me wanted to change at some point, to fix it, to ensure that you have a proper and efficient carriageway down to the airport, so you're not bottlenecked. especially when it's Christmas time and everybody trying to shop at Penny Savers and Viewport down the road. You know, we want those iconic projects that, like the steps we moved up in Moray, iconic projects. We want those. But we know we have to do some robust maintenance. We discussed at the last town hall meeting that some of the drains we have are older than I am. From special works days, built with river gravel, no kind of support system structure in it. And so now that they're failing, we have to find ways to systematically replace them. So they have to do that. And that brings to mind one of the big things they want to look at is Southwest Tobago and trying to do some flood mitigation there. We discussed that at the town hall we had down in Bonaccord. That was 2-3 cycles ago. And so they're actively working on coming up with those designs so that beyond what was done outside Cocoa Reef, we could prevent flooding in that entire area from lowlands all the way down in that southwestern area of the island. And of course, we discussed Assembly Legislature. You may have seen that there was an ad out for tender applications for design for an annex or a new Assembly Legislature building. And no, we're not going in there to bulldoze the historic building. We're trying to preserve the historic building as it is now and do the necessary add-ons in keeping with what will make sense for the historic building. But what we have now really has, I mean, one of these days I'll ask the presiding officer to show you around the chamber. TMTech is now refusing to go into the transformer room because it's not up to code. We have molding happening and all sorts of things happening in the building. The floors wobbling and so on. So we have to do some fixes there. But their allocation is just 1.5 million for capital development. But we need to start. I'm advised we had about 20 applicants for that tender process. It will be completely open, so open that we will ask you, the public, at the appropriate time to help us make a decision on which design we should go with. So you will get a chance to come online and help us decide based on what you like as Tobagonians. And there's no process more open and transparent than that, right? And of course, we're still looking to build out some work for the diaspora. One of the things that came out of the last meeting we had with those in New York and tri-state area is that they wanted to have access to some virtual help this year, that before they even land in Tobago, they could know which direction to turn for whatever help they need. They could be apprised of all the changes in the space in terms of regulation. So we want to engage them. We're still looking to engage investors, and we keep putting out the RFPs to engage as many as possible. So yes, we discussed quite a lot of stuff, and before I take some questions based on who we have, we also spoke about eco-culture tourism and how agriculture can play a role in that, and that being green. I should let you know that the Tobago Bay Leaf and Spices project will start in earnest. If you are familiar with the funding for the THA, you will see several years, umpteen years of a bay leaf project being there on the books for umpteen years, and not much happening. But in earnest, that should happen in this fiscal, as well as a herb project that they're doing. Once it's classified as a herb, then we'll be growing it. And yes, you may not know, but onions and garlics are classified as herbs, so they are in the rush as well. So we have all of that happening. And although I did not full joy the carnival as you might have, I think I just passed through one event. But I I saw a report, and I just wanted to mention it because from an economic perspective, the reason for having a standalone carnival is so that we can draw people to the island. We have to keep doing things to increase our transient population and bring people to the island. Because when they come, transportation services are used, accommodation, meals. They are I'm in the supermarket over the carnival weekend, and people bouncing me down, asking me for selfie, people I don't know, all over the place, right? And to be honest, I have not seen a time in Tobago for such a long while that we have had such a large influx at one time on the island. And I want to commend the players, because that certainly have done more than $12 million input for our economic space in terms of the spend on the space. And let me say this to you, when you see in Trinidad they were spending 100 and something million on a taste of carnival, how much of that 100 and something million I think the central government was making back? The idea is not for the central government to make back that money. It's an investment so that the economic space makes more than that. And I'm confident that our economic space has made more than that over the preceding week. I see that the Chamber of Commerce is reporting that their sector with bars and so on was a 500% increase for the period. They reported that for all of the accommodation, people reached out, they were reporting 100% on occupancy. In fact, they are saying that this might be one of our peaks in the longest while in terms of occupancy rates for the island. And of course, when we sit and we quantify how much was made by your supermarkets, those who rented cars, those who cook food and sell, many of you, I drove through town the day before Saturday, sometimes Saturday afternoon, and I saw the whole stretch take over with tents. People pitch the tents all over to sell something along the parade route and so on. So you got a chance to benefit and earn. That was the intent behind it. And so one of the things, even in this new fiscal that we have to work on, is the matter of airlift, getting people to the island, getting more people to the island, in a much more steady rate. We already saw the increase with cruise ships moving to 70 plus cruise liners or calls for this season, up from 38 just over 40, up from 40. So we are moving in the right direction, and we want to see a lot more of that. And so in the coming days, when we get to World Travel Market, that's one of the things that we're targeting. How do we get much more airlift into the Tobago space, both international and domestic? Because I have no interest really in bemoaning what Caribbean Airlines does or it doesn't do, right? I have an island, we have an island to run, and we need to get the people to the island, because if we believe in all our hearts this is the greatest of the island on the planet, then we must want to share it and make money while sharing it as an island. That's the key. So I want to thank you all. At this point, we'll open for questions. The secretaries are here, except for the Secretary for Education that had to step out, unfortunately. But we are here to answer your questions, and we will field those questions at this time. On the virtual space, you could indicate by virtually raising your hand. All right, so I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, so Liz Williams.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chief Secretary.
Good afternoon, Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chief Secretary and your executive. What I wanted to know from you is, in terms of the unspent balances, do you have like a total? And the shortfalls that you spoke about, over 100 and something million dollars in terms of the shortfall, do you have any intentions of meeting anytime soon with the Minister of Finance with respect to how soon will the Tobago House of Assembly receive its monies?
All right, so I'm always meeting with him. I'll take the latter question first. I'm always meeting with the Minister of Finance, and I have been writing him and engaging quite politely. And believe it or not, when we meet, those meetings are always extremely cordial. We had one of such meetings just before the budget, and we certainly will have one post the budget. I mean, they barely now come through the parliament with the thing, so I need to give him a little breather, but I'm not going to stop from advocating for those monies. He's of a different view from mine. He's of the view that as Minister of Finance, he has the legal remit, even after the allocation is passed, to then determine that a shortfall be given, and that is perfectly legal. I have a completely different viewpoint to that, but we will keep taking steps to get those monies. In terms of your first question, which is the unspent balances, now we have divisions doing their reconciliation now, which will tell you what divisions, monies released to divisions, what that figure will be that they were not able to utilize within the fiscal period last year. But that will not be anything substantive. What we do, however, and I need to say this, what we do, however, is that at the start of every fiscal like now, we sit and we purposefully pull aside somewhere in the region of $100 to $110 million just so that we are able to pay CPEP and URP workers for the next fiscal. Now let me explain what that means. We usually get in every budget an 18 million and a 9 point something million to treat with CPEP and URP. The number of CPEP and URP workers we have, that is not even a drop in the bucket. In fact, probably the first 2 months of salaries and that done. So what we have been purposefully doing, and is not unique to this government, previous governments did it, is that from the start of the fiscal like now, we meet as an executive and agree to purposefully withhold into unspent somewhere in the region of 100 million just so that we could pay CPEP and URP workers. But that's not unspent balances insofar as those were monies for works to be done and we didn't get a chance to do it, we didn't get to utilize it, and the money just go back. There's no going back of any money, right? The monies were well utilized in the fiscal period. We're seeing the divisions having greater capacity to utilize those monies. So what we have there as unspent is what we purposefully kept back to ensure we could pay CPEP and URP workers, but not necessarily monies that were left back by divisions because divisions didn't do the work for which the monies were assigned. Ms. Jackson?
Hi, good afternoon, Chief Secretary. My question is, I just want to know what's your take on the state of Tobago's economy right now, and when can we see you meeting with the private sector and so on towards improving the economy and helping establish that enabling environment for the private sector to grow? And so I saw you presented a little breakdown of how the allocations will be disaggregated. Would that be something that will be released to the public?
For your last question, that's easy. The allocation is actually in the estimates. But yes, we can release to the public what is allocated based on the estimates from the Parliament and from the Ministry of Finance. So that's easy. I mean, it can be found online on the Ministry of Finance website where the estimate books are. If you go there, you will see the breakdown for the Tobago House of Assembly. But I can provide you with a spreadsheet to make it easier for you to access it. Secondly, in terms of the state of the economy, I think Tobago has done well coming out of COVID. We have done well coming out of COVID. I want you to understand that our economy only reopened in April last year, and it reopened in tandem with returning of half of the number of domestic flights during the Easter period last year. So we're just a little over a year since we reopened in full. I want you to bear that in mind. April 2022 is when we started back having Caribbean Airlines flight, half of the pre-COVID number of flights, a little over a year. Given what COVID has done to our sectors, to come out of that and only have a decline by 2%, part of which is owing to food inflation, which was up at over 17% across the country, I think is to do remarkably. In fact, I look at some previous years, like in 2017, our decline was around 4%. There was no COVID then. We just had a change of government, but we didn't have COVID then. Notwithstanding, we acknowledge that we have a lot more work to do for the economy of Tobago, a lot more work. And what has to happen is that we have to push on getting a lot more investments in the space, FDIs in the space, get the construction sector going insofar as public projects that can drive a lot in the construction sector. Some should be starting up somewhere in Shervan soon for housing, and that will move a lot of people in this space as well. We also are looking at getting more flights to the island. We currently have an MOU under review right now when it comes to the Scandinavian region. So we have the MOU for charters coming from and for flights coming from the Scandinavian region, which at one point was our peak source market, so that we can return there and get people back to Tobago. You see, Tobago's population is small, and the more we inflate our population superficially through tourism and other means, is the better everybody in the economic space will do. In terms of meeting with those in the private sector, in fact, I wrote the private sector earlier this week. I wrote the private sector, and I sent the private sector copies of full copies of the feasibility studies and the plans and so on for Scarborough. And I said to the private sector through the chamber president, I hope he received my dispatch, that we need to meet at some point, at some time mutually convenient, to discuss that and other matters. So I have already dispatched a letter, I think that was Monday or Tuesday this week, asking for us to have those conversations in terms of where we want to take the island and the big ticket projects and ideas for the island. So that engagement is already in train. Is it that your hand is still up, Ms. Williams? Is there another question?
Yes, I have other questions, Mr. Chief Secretary.
Sure.
I don't know if you're hearing me. Yes. In terms of the deputy, I know that the deputy chief secretary is right next to you. There was a situation recently with respect to salaries, a number of high salaries paid to persons out of the office of the deputy chief secretary. I don't know if Dr. Faith B. Israel would be able to comment on that. I know there was a list circulating. I did contact one person from the list, and the person did confirm the salaries being paid. What the opposition is stating is that they are looking at, in terms of the Tobago House of Assembly, stating that there is a lack of monies, but yet these persons are being paid exorbitant salaries. I don't know if that also could be answered.
Certainly.
And Mr. Chief Secretary, sorry, Mr. Chief Secretary, I know you spoke about the development workers. Is there anything that can be done to prevent these workers from constantly being paid late? I know there's also a situation, I know that Mrs. Natisha Charles Panton, she always tries to assist in her division, especially with respect to sometimes some of these workers always every other fortnight being paid late. I know Mrs. Natisha Charles Panton intervened, but I know you mentioned it in terms of the millions of dollars every fortnight. Is there something that could be put in place, Mr. Chief?
So I will start. Liz, are you hearing me? Okay, so there are several things that we need to put into perspective. I did see the list of salaries and the list of individuals that were part of that document that was released. Coincidentally, it seemed to have been an amalgamation of information that was presented as a question that was asked in the House for written response. What is important to note that the salaries are actually not exorbitant when we look at the skills that we require, when we look at the technical capacity that is required to do some of the work that we need to do. It's important to note, though, that in many of the situations, in many of the names that were there, and even many of the positions that were there, though the salaries were correct, some of those individuals were part of the team when the former Deputy Chief Secretary was there. And actually some of them left probably even before he demitted office. So the idea of them being paid for 22 months or whatever was the number is actually inaccurate. So if you had reached out to the individuals who were on the list, even those who may have said that they are working there, the number of months that they have been working there is also not necessarily true. It's important to note, though, that I think that Tobagonians need to be conscious of the fact that information like this is really put out to kind of distract us from some of the bigger issues that are going on. As a professional in my right, I have a doctoral degree in public health, a master's degree in public health, and a bachelor's degree in neuroscience. The figures that are presented there are actually not even close to industry standard salaries. And one of the things we have to be conscious of the fact is that when we want production out of the Tobago House of Assembly, we have to be very willing to pay individuals for the technical capacity that they are bringing to the table. So there was, those salaries were actually part of a process where the management services unit looked at what was out there, looked at what was, okay. Many of them were even way lower than what the industry standards were, and that was what was recommended. But again, in many instances, many of those individuals are not even currently working with the Tobago House of Assembly. And those that are working with the Tobago House of Assembly certainly have not been working there for the 22 months as was purported by the document. So it's important that we don't get distracted by that kind of information that is being put out there, because Tobago needs to get to a place where we attract the best technical people to do the work that we need them to do.
Thank you, Dr. Faith. And the only thing to add to that is not just attracting the best people, but attracting our brightest Tobagonians to the table. We don't want the continual exodus from the island of our brightest minds and our experts. We want to find a way to attract them around the table. And I think we should be happy when other Tobagonians, especially young Tobagonians who were not being given a chance before, are getting a chance now. Because there are in fact many instances where divisions were hiring people from elsewhere and from the place next door to us to do the work at higher salaries. But this government is insistent that there are Tobagonians qualified and capable and should be the ones to have a seat at the table. Really, question of late wages, and yes, that's a perennial problem and is really something I wish was not still in this space, especially when all is being done to ensure that funds remain available for the entire fiscal year to treat with salaries. You see why I mentioned that already for fiscal 2024, before we even started that fiscal year, we already put aside to ensure URP and CPEP get paid. That's being responsible. We're already doing that for fiscal 2025 to ensure that monies remain for them to be paid. I gave you the breakdown in terms of development workers at infrastructure. The story is similar across at food security, where when we pay the salaries, only a little is left for the actual development work. And so I agree with anyone who will say that it's unacceptable that people continue to be paid late. And so one of the things we are doing is taking another look at the management system, the account management system that treats with the disbursement of salaries for this category of workers. I will also add that I am noticing a trend where the daily rated workers are getting their salaries in the trust week as opposed to in the actual week for which they are supposed to be paid. And so a whole of government approach is being looked at. We are currently looking at it inclusive of the administrators, the chief administrator, and coming up with a plan, a design that will ensure that it's never late again. So we have not completed the planning work yet. That might include having to have separate salary clerks to treat with those category of workers, so that they're sort of isolated from the rest of the system, so that the thing will run much more efficiently than it is now. And I could tell you, the thing could run efficiently if we wanted to, if workers wanted to. That's just the God honest true. Because I have seen, for example, where releases were made for ex gratia payment, and releases made today to divisions, and before the end of the week, people get their money in their account, right? So we know when to be efficient when we want to get our benefits out of the system. But it is not fair. It is not fair to the daily rated workers and those at the bottom of the spectrum, because they too have needs. They too have families. They too have expectations, and reasonable expectation, that when they choke the card on the day they're supposed to get their salary, that it should be there. So it is not excusable in my mind, and that's why we are sitting actively with the public servants to work out what is the best framework in ensuring that the salaries can be on time. And this has been an age-long problem. It's something I know I campaigned on, and I said to the people, we want to make it a thing of the past. It is not yet a thing of the past. Sometimes when you get baptized and you want to live a new life for the Lord, you just struggle a little bit until you get a hang of the holiness. So I suspect in a similar fashion, using that analogy, despite the change in government and changes in policy and ensuring that we increase the salaries for those at the lowest level and treating them better and so on, the struggle is still there to shake off some of the old habits of paying people late and when we feel like. And let me give you an example. You may be aware of that program we have with the 10 on 10 off program. I remember the first installation of that program. We're trying to meet payments for Christmas 2022, last year Christmas. And we set up the thing when we realized most of the young men in the program, they don't have bank accounts. And this is one of the things revealed through that program, that we have quite a large number of young people on the island that don't have a bank account anywhere. So they're locked out of every system anyway. They're not even in a position where they could create a credit history right now for future use. And so we organize the workers in finance to work through the Christmas period and work late in ensuring that the checks are encashed, so that they have their cash in hand in time for Christmas. When we're making the first set of payments and the workers come down to Shaw Park to collect their checks, to only be called and say, look, it have a whole group of people, no checks for them. When we did the check, the pay sheet on a clerk's desk, they said they missed the pay sheet. And in my mind, I'm saying, but how could that be missed? If you know you have 500 workers, isn't the supervisor checking up all the pay sheets to make sure that the thing is being done for 500 workers? But only the day when the checks are being issued, we have to apologize, take the licks as the people in the front and say, we're sorry, right? We are to blame for you getting paid late, and try to get the thing rectified on the back end. And that's why I'm saying it requires a collaborative effort between the public servants and those of us in the executive to finally put a fix on the late salaries matter, and we are actively working on that right now. Any other questions? I see no other hand, and so I wish to thank you for joining us for this press briefing. I did indicate that we were going to use the Manta Lodge as the place that we will stay. Because we did work very late last night. We worked till Minister 9 last night before dinner and so on. And was up early this morning, some before 5 a.m. this morning, and work. I must also thank all of those who made every effort in ensuring that the Manta Lodge was ready to accommodate. Is also part of the testing phase for the enterprise to make sure everything is working properly. ACs are working. We did see 1 or 2 leaks, and we're trying to rectify where the leaks are coming from and so on. We did see some plumbing issues. We're trying to have the kitchen utilized. All of these things have to happen before opening our hotel. So it was just an opportune time and a time for us to have the retreat without having to pay for accommodation anywhere. But we must also say thank you to the folks at Blue Waters Inn, because Manta Lodge does not have a conference room, and so we had to use, for part of the Suite, the conference room facilities at the Blue Waters Inn, who are our good neighbors. So thank you very much to those at Blue Waters Inn. You have been excellent towards us. Thank you to the community of Speyside. You have been an excellent host. I mean, when we rolled in yesterday, they were giving me 4 big bunches of coconut water and thing, to make sure we are well hydrated with natural electrolytes and so on, treating us well and so on. So thank you to the community of Speyside. You continue to outdo yourself. Typical country village. When it comes to country, hospitality is key. So thank you. Love you all. God's blessing on all of you, Tobago. Have a good one.